Alright, a very good morning to you. Welcome along. It is the 20th of June and we beat the Gibraltar 3-0 last night. If you were interested, we'd like to hear from you this morning. 087 918 180 is the WhatsApp number. We've plenty more on the show, including our first depth chart of the Rugby World Cup season and more reaction to the news that the Camogie players and the Gaelic footballers are playing the rest of the season under protest. We'll get to all that a little bit later. First though, Keith Treacy's here. Good morning to you, Keith. How are you?
Morning, not too bad. Not too bad at all.
Adrian Barry's here.
Morning, folks.
Colm is also here. Colm, how are you?
Hi, Ger.
A routine 3-0 win. Everybody beats Gibraltar 3-0, said John Fallon on the show. And lo and behold, he was correct. How do we feel after this?
Not great. Like it's when we drew with France, when we got beat 1-0 by France, we came away thinking that's not a bad result given the quality of the opposition we were up against. Given the quality of the opposition we were up against last night. Not great, probably took a bit too long to come. The first half was very, very forgettable. I know that within the first 30 seconds Jamie McGrath has a good strike at the penalty spot, great start, but we just didn't build on it and we didn't turn the screw enough. We just didn't put them under enough pressure. Second half was an awful lot better, but again, because of the level of opposition we're up against, not a lot really to write home about there.
I think the difficulty after a game like last night, where there's lots to be happy about, and you know the rest of the world has also struggled to beat them 3-0, is that it comes as a pair with the Greece game. That's the problem. We can't suddenly forget that the Greece game happened.
Yeah, the Greece game was the one. You know, we should be just brushing Gibraltar aside. We want to try and finish third in the group, which means we need to get ahead of Greece. Having seen what Greece have to offer on Friday and what we have to offer, I don't really fancy our chances. And then, you know, people are down kicking it down the road and saying, well, maybe we could beat Holland, and you're thinking, come on lads, we can't even play well against Greece. And I know the Dutch side on the eye, they haven't been great. Watching them, they haven't been great, but when you look at that side on paper, they're very, very good, and to think that we're going to be able to go toe to toe with them, I really don't see it. So look, last night was exactly what we needed, exactly what we wanted, but you know, it still doesn't leave a good taste in the mouth. The Friday night is where all of the damage was done.
Yeah, and yes, right, not to sound like a complete moron, the best performances that we've had under Stephen Kenny have come against the good teams, against Portugal, against France. Like, I would expect us to be way more competitive and way sharper in September, when everybody knows that their job is to defend for 90 minutes against France in Paris, and then basically to defend for 87 minutes against the Dutch in Dublin, and then for the last 5 minutes to, you know,
is that the Steve Staunton, we don't play well in June, what was it he said that time? We never play well in whatever it was. We might play better I think there's
we're strong in March.
I think there's
we're always strong in March.
I do think the point about, like, if Friday had gone slightly differently for us, if we'd gotten something out of that game at all, that there isn't you mentioned the 3-0 par for the course results, that all the other teams so far against Gibraltar have managed the exact same result. All of them, I think, were ahead at half time, suggesting a little bit more comfort in the performance.
Wow.
We
stat boy over here, what's your amazing stat?
Unbelievable. Only once before Gibraltar held the opposition to a goalless draw at half time in a qualifier. Keith, what was the opposition? Very close to home. Ireland 2019.
Really?
Yeah. So you're looking 51 and a half minutes on the clock. I'd actually put it to both of you at the stadium. Was there murmurs going around? Was there a lot of, Jesus, this could actually...
Well, there was boos at half time. I was trying to sort of quantify exactly what it was at that time. They didn't go on particularly long. It felt like a kind of a guttural frustration as much as anything else. You can read an awful lot into, like, fans booing at a stadium, but it felt like a guttural kind of frustration at the fact that we had a couple of chances. Like, if Jamie McGrath buries that on 30 seconds...
that sums up the Stephen Kenny reign for me. It's like, he puts that in.
It's a different game.
Less than a minute gone, and you're like, well, it's a procession.
Yeah.
And that sounds easy, okay, if you put the chances in, obviously. But, like, to create that chance, it was good play. Like, Jason Knight speeding down the right, beautiful pullback, and a good connection with the shot. Either side of the goalkeeper, it's a goal. And then suddenly you're like, this could be any score. Just exactly what they need. That's Kenny's side, like, in a nutshell.
Yeah, but you need to be more ruthless. When the keeper saves that and we don't score, we need to get straight back on and keep them under the pressure, keep the screw turning, like, we know historically their defence is not great. They can see 3 goals on average most games, so just keep putting the ball in the box. Eventually we'll get a chance off them. These aren't world-class defenders, so you don't have to complicate the game. They were in the middle of the pitch, it was really, really compact, not an awful lot of space. OTBAM couldn't do an awful lot because there wasn't room in behind. Him and Ferguson were coming to feet, and it was just all getting a little bit muddled down in the middle of the pitch. So if they're going to give you the wide areas, take them and just keep put decent quality into the box, and eventually their coach will say, lads, we're going to have to stop these balls coming into the box. They'll get a little bit tighter to you, and that's when you can start doing little 1-2s. But I thought the Mikey Johnson coming on was really, really needed, because we were playing around Gibraltar, we weren't playing through them. It was all pass. You needed somebody just to go and have a dribble at somebody and commit somebody, and as soon as you commit somebody, then you've broke their lines and there's a bit of chaos in their formation now. So I thought Mikey Johnson was I give Kenny a bit of credit for that, because it's hard to see that from pitch level. I was sitting up in the gods and it was fairly obvious that we didn't need the third centre half. So I give Stephen Kenny big credit for bringing on Mikey Johnson, and it change the game, even though the first goal was a little bit fortuitous. I had that free kick not have landed at Mikey Johnson's feet, would we have broken there? Would that have come? Everyone seems to be in agreement that Mikey Johnson should have started the game. Is the reason he didn't because Kenny has no intention of starting him against the likes of France and the Netherlands? Yeah, but I probably, but I don't accept that. You know, every game is different. There's no point I'm not starting Mikey Johnson today against Gibraltar because we're playing Holland in a month's time. What's the point in that? It's every game is different. You take every game on its merits, to give a John Giles quote. But you do. We should be beating these teams. We should be able to go to a 4-3-3 against these and just beat them, just push them away. Now, look, when the Dutch come here, we can go back to a 5. We can make it horrible. And like you said, notoriously, when the bigger teams come here, we do okay. And I think that's because we're going out with the mindset, with the mentality that we're going to suffer out of possession here. We're going to have to do an awful lot of running, but within the 90 minutes we'll get Evan Ferguson a chance. Before he became the Ireland manager, Kenny was more a 4-3-3. Like, I remember before we went to 3 at the back, talking with the League of Ireland fans, particularly Johnny Ward, he's like, there's no way Stephen Kenny's playing 3 at the back. There's absolutely not. He's never going to. And then I think because we had loads of good centre backs, not many midfielders, and not many attacking players at the time, it was like, this is a fairly obvious thing to do. And probably Anthony Barry was involved in, like, oh, look at where we are here, look at the situation. And we played really well. Was that the first game? Was the Portugal game, was it, when we went to 3 at the back? Anyway, early doors. And I wonder if he might be considering going back now and saying, right, like, it's do or die time for him and his reign, and actually going back to a 4, because we were really open at the very start when we had the 4 and the midfield wasn't strong enough to be able to protect them. Is there a possibility we actually abandon the 3 at the back now in the next window, which, let's face it, is one of the most difficult windows that you can possibly have? Yeah, look, I personally, I would prefer to see us playing a 4 at the back, but then I'm starting to think, if I'm an opposition analyst, I'm thinking, how can you get our Ireland if they're playing 4 at the back? I don't think we have any wing backs, any left back, any right back who's a decent 1v1 defender. When you look at O'Dowd on Friday night, he was absolutely shocking. You look at Doherty on the right, very good player, but 1v1 situations you don't really trust him. So all I think is we need to be able to defend better in 1v1 situations. Will he go back to a 4? I'm not too sure. I think he has this blanket approach that I'm going to play 3 centre halves with 2 wing backs. Obviously didn't work for the first half last night and he changed it, but I can't see him. I think the 5, the 3 at the back, whatever you want to call it, I think will be his mainstay going forward. But I don't generally think that suits us in an attacking sense. I thought with the Obafemi, Ferguson and Johnson, when Johnson came on, I thought the 3 up front actually did suit us a lot better. But against the bigger nations, I just think we're a little bit open with the 4-3-3. If you played 4-3-3, right, just to indulge me for a minute, who would the 3 in midfield be in that scenario? So say you do have Obafemi, Johnson and Ferguson as your 3 up front. Who are the 3 in midfield that we could in some way make that work? I think I would put an awful lot of legs in there. I would tell our probably Cullen, Malumbi and Knight, I'd tell them just to go and get the ball. See, Knight is probably the only one who could go and get involved with the attack and play. Malumbi and Cullen for me are a little bit similar. They'll run around, they'll put all the work in the world in, they'll win the ball back, but when they get it, they can't really hurt teams. Knight has a little bit of that about him. He can hurt you. So I'd put them 3 in there, and I'd give Knight the licence to go and be the link to the front 3. But again, I think we're a little bit too open. Like, if we were playing France with that formation, I'm concerned. Yeah, very, very concerned. But say it was Seamus Coleman at right back. Is that giving you a little bit more comfortable? I mean, obviously it would be Coleman versus Mbappe on his own, really. Yeah, that's it. Well, you would like, and even Kenny Cunningham was talking about this last night. If he's playing right back, he would prefer a right winger to come and just stand 10 yards in front of him and double up that way rather than playing a 5 at the back and being a 1v1 up against somebody. So look, it's horses for courses. I think we can chop and change, but I think we're very naive to say, listen, Ireland are going to play whatever formation X, Y and Z. I think it has to change from game to game, because we're not good enough to just throw a blanket on this and say we're playing a 3 at the back every game regardless of who we're playing. I think we have to change every single game, because we're not good enough just to say that's us and that's how we play.
Is that the only reason for you that he continued with a back 3 last night? Because we could all see it was kind of pointless basically. Like 2 of the 3 defenders were redundant.
Well, I think
the first half. But is he doing that so
is Nathan Collins
going to keep it with France and the Dutch?
But is Nathan Collins not supposed to join in midfield and that's where you create your overload? Because like you should be able to play that if like. Okay, it's a stupid comparison, but John Stones plays at centre back but actually ends up in midfield, and that's what the model for 3 at the back against a team where you're dominating possession is, that your centre backs are adding extra. John Egan sometimes adds an extra, and all of a sudden it's 2 on 1, and that's what the overload is. We just weren't very good at it.
No, we weren't very good at it. But look, again, I give Stephen Kenny, he spotted that. He did make the change at half time. He brought Mikey Johnson on, but you did want Collins to step in, and every now and then he did step in it and go in, but the middle of the pitch was so congested that his first pass was just out to the winger, and then the winger would go engage with somebody and then eventually come back, and we just end up passing around Gibraltar rather than through them. But like I said, it was a lot better in the second half when we gave it to Mikey Johnson. We isolated him, and I think he was under clear instructions just to run at defenders. As soon as you get it, run at defenders, cause a bit of chaos, and it worked in the end. But I do think, Colin, I think you're right. The reason he played the 3, the 5 at the back last night is because that's what he's going to play going forward.
I think there's an element as well of, like, we're obviously saying this morning he changed things at half time and that worked. It was great. It sort of changed the face of the game. I think also if you watch back that first half, like, technically we were just off it at times, you know, like the system was working fine, but there was a bad ball from Ferguson at one point. There's bad ball from Obafemi at another stage. Like, technically at times the system was grand. Like, I think any system against Gibraltar, you're relying technically on your players to be able to do it. And I do think that we get carried away at times about, is the manager not good enough? Is it the manager or the players? Like, there's probably a little bit of everything at play. Certainly looking at it last night, technically at times against that level of quality, we just weren't at it.
Yeah, and look, I referenced it last night with Gibraltar going and dropping back into a really low block. Their striker was so isolated. You know, you want to look at an isolated striker. Look at that fella last night. He barely had a kick at the ball. Was just running after shadows. But we kept playing around them, and when Mikey Johnson came on, it was an awful lot better. But it just tactically, when Gibraltar dropped back into that low block, we kept the ball recycling around their centre halves. We're taking 2-3 touches, bopping it into midfield. Cullen would turn, he take a touch, take another touch, and you're thinking this needs to be 1 and 2 touch. We need inventive passing here, and the tempo dropped an awful lot. Because Gibraltar tempo's dropped, our tempo seemed to drop, and that can't be the case. Like I say, we need to turn the screw, keep the tempo high, put them on the back foot, get them moving from side to side an awful lot. And when they came off it, it felt like our tempo came off it, and like I said, that can happen sometimes. You feel like the game is a little bit stale and you just drop with it, but you need then people just barking, the likes of a Coleman barking at people to keep your standards high. 1 touch, 2 touch in the midfield. It was just all a little bit pedestrian, a little bit slow, and yeah, it wasn't there. Have you played in games like that? Like, so Gibraltar were playing that game last night, 11 players behind the ball. I can't only imagine the frustration of the players. Like, it is hard. Yeah, well, you know, we don't talk too much about that. They're a very low ranked team, technically very bad. Anytime they got the ball, you felt, we're going to get this back now in about 4 seconds, it'll be absolutely fine. But at the same time, they're sat behind the ball. You know, the trying to get the ball wide, trying to get to the end line and get it back in was obviously the ambition, but hard against that number of players. Have you been on the pitch before like that, where you're like, Jesus, we're so much better than this crowd, but... Yeah, look, it always is, but you believe in the process, you believe in what's happening, and we've all been in games where, look, it only takes a one decent ball into the box, a defender to get half ahead, and there's somebody to arrive late, or you know, half a deflection. So as long as you put quality into the box, and I think it was Sam Allardyce that used to drill this into me. I think it's for every 10 quality balls you put into the box, you'll get at least 1 shot on goal. So he used to always say to me, I need at least 10 decent balls into the box off you a game, and he would demand that from the wingers. So if you send your wingers out there, and notoriously I think this is what Ireland are good at over the years, getting the ball out wide and putting it into the box. And modern day football now is all about, don't let them play through us, make them play around us. If teams are going to let us do that, then take advantage of it, because we're notoriously good at it. Don't turn down the easy stuff.
In the overall scheme of things, did Liam Brady have a point that this is the worst group of players in a long time?
Yeah, look, I've said this last night, and I'm a lot younger than Liam Brady. I'm only 34, but this is probably the worst Irish team on paper that I've seen, and I hate throwing that at them, because I know quite a few of them personally, and they try their socks off. It's not the one to try, and it's really not, but I think it's a marriage that hasn't quite worked too well. I think the manager is asking certain players within the group to do things that they're not comfortable doing, and maybe that they can't do. So
what kind of stuff are you talking about there? Because this is something that comes up. It's like, oh, we can't play the way he wants us to play, but what are we talking about there?
Well, look, if you have, say, John Egan is on the ball, any of our back lads are on the ball, and you have Cullen coming towards it and somebody's breathing down his back, is your heart not in your mouth thinking Cullen's going to be nicked here, or Malumbi might lose the ball, or even Noim might just get nicked here? Because the one thing I always say now in football is that if you press properly, you will get chances in the game just by your press. So if we can negate that and say we're not going to give anybody any easy chances, we're not going to play sideward passes, we're not going to play backward passes in our own half, and just take that out of it, say we're not going to give you that, and you're going to have to earn everything. And my heart is just in my mouth a little bit when our players are trying to play at the back. And I don't know whether it was the first half or the second half last night. I think it was one of our centre halves tried a back heel in our own 18-yard box to Darragh O'Shea, and I know he's been injured. I know it's probably just a little bit of a mental relapse, but international football is 90 minutes long, and if you're coughing up little chances like that against Gibraltar, it just doesn't bode well for the bigger teams coming here.
Is it mentally, in your own experience, very difficult to play against a side that is that inferior to you? I.e. that, like Adrian said a while ago there, like every 4 seconds you want to get the ball back when they have it. So to keep on going and going and going, like what type of character do you need in that instance? And it kind of goes back to the overall quality of the squad.
Yeah, you need that little bit of quality. You need somebody to break them down, just that little bit of stardust. But that's when you need to take your own little personal responsibility. Like if I was playing on the wing last night and I got the ball, I'd be wanting to go and commit people, make a difference, because the pass and the easy Aussie stuff, like Gibraltar, for as bad as they were, defensive shape actually wasn't that bad. They were moving quite well. So you need somebody to pierce the lines, to penetrate it. You can't just pass around them and just keep lumping it in. Every now and then you have to mix it up and think, right, he's going to run us. And then as soon as Johnson gets the ball, you can see the right winger thinking, I'm going to go and have to help me right back here. Now we have an overload somewhere else on the pitch. So it was decent, but just a little bit lethargic for long periods.
I've always assumed, I was interested to hear your point there about Cullen coming for the ball. I've always assumed so we talk about our ability to be able to play a bit of football, how it's a bit easier on the eye than watching the lump it up stuff, and I've always just taken it for granted that the players, that's just a given, that they'd rather play that than play the lump it up stuff. But you're actually saying maybe not.
Well, I don't know what the individuals think themselves, but when I look at it, and you're seeing us fire balls into the middle of the pitch into certain players, my heart is in my mouth an awful lot of the time, because I don't think we have very, very good ball playing. Now they have good attributes. Cullen's a brilliant player. I love what he does for Burnley, but his biggest attribute wouldn't be getting on the ball and playing these eye the needle passes or playing on the half turn. It's about getting around the pitch, breaking up the play, winning the ball for us. He's good at what he does, but have we got a ball playing midfielder? Is there anybody you'd say just fire the ball into him or trust him on it every time he has it? Like a Wes, I hate throwing older names in because it happens a lot, but the ilk of a Wes Houlihan, just say give it to him, he won't lose it.
I thought Smallbone was poor last night,
but Smallbone against Greece I thought was absolutely disgrace. I thought he was really, really poor, but I thought that was a very poor decision from Stephen Kenny to put him in. That was his debut, his competitive debut, Greece away. That's very, very deep water to be throwing somebody in. Gibraltar at home in a qualifier, totally different thing, but Greece away in the heat, very, very difficult.
Yeah, like the thing with this Ireland side, I look at it like we're very confident of passing the ball among ourselves at the back with no pressure, and then you go up to midfield, it gets a little bit more pressurised, and then it's almost like we're dying to play ball, but as soon as we get into the opposition's final third, all sense of what we were trying to do goes out the window. And I don't know if it goes back to the fact that the majority of our players are not playing top level football, or if it is a management issue.
So to crystallise that, basically if you were in charge of this team, we'd be playing the ball back to front and pressing.
Yeah, but look, it would be back to front football, but it would be that for you know, I'd be throwing a jab so we can land a punch. I wouldn't just be going out there saying, lads, regardless of what they do, I just want you to pump along. If they stand off us, then yeah, we would play through the tours. We would try and play nice, attractive football. But if a team comes and they go and press me high, I would just clip over that press.
Can we just tease this out, right? Because you don't believe that we have the midfielders to do it. And I don't think anybody is here going, well, hang on a second, look at them, it's so amazing. They've got hidden skills that we just haven't seen yet. That transmits to the players, right? And so you've been in the trap that, like, these are not champions. That's what he would say about you in press conferences to the Italian journalists. We'd be sitting there going, I mean, he sees we're here, right? You know, we've got ears, we can listen to this. But, like, what does that do for the team's confidence? And are we then stuck? Because 25,000 would have been at that game last night if they hadn't bundled the tickets. But in the previous years, we would have been lucky to get 20,000, and they would have lied to us and said there's 40,000. But it felt like there probably was 35 to 40,000 at the game last night. Like, we're bored watching back to front football. It was shite to watch under Martin O'Neill.
Yeah, look, I get that, but I remember.
Is there no third way here?
Of course, it's not. Listen, if Stephen Kenny's not here, then we have to go back to, you know, Sam Allardyce. It's not a complete 360 here. There is a hybrid way of playing, and it's horses for courses. If France come to town, you can play over it. If Gibraltar come to town, we can try and be a little bit more advanced of employing play through the tours. But it to me, the only time we look dangerous when you throw your like, we can forget about Gibraltar. We should be hammering the likes of Gibraltar. So I'll go back to the Greece game on Friday. The only time we scored, with the goal we scored, was a set piece, a flick on from Evan Ferguson, Nathan Collins in at the back. Nathan Collins' volley was a set piece that comes in and gets headed out, and then he volleys it. The only shots we had on target, the only time we looked dangerous, was when we put the ball into the box. So all this attractive football, people are saying, oh, it has got better, it's more, it's moving forward, it's getting better. I would argue, yeah, it probably has been a little bit better on the eye, but had we been a little bit more pragmatic, we'd have won a lot more games of football.
Is there a case as well, just on that point, that, like, so he spent the early part of his Ireland career, Stephen Kenny, trying to adapt this new system under a lot of pressure at that time, and the things that he was working with at that point in terms of forward options were Troy Parrott at some point was like this guy is going to be the one, Ogbene maybe in a forward position, Obafemi in a forward position, so they were his tools. And then more laterally, this genius comes into play who's 7'8" and you know, built like a whatever, and he's a very different option than what he had when he adapted this style of play. Also, you've had Adam Ida on the sidelines for the last, year and a half, and suddenly he's back in. Like, looking at the two of them up close last night, the sheer size of them, very different options, ability to win the ball, a good high ball in. Like, it's a very, I wonder if behind the scenes Stephen Kenny isn't going, I've set up my stall, I'm going to play this way. Yes, everything I've had, the front options have changed, and there might be a more obvious back to front ball, but I'm going to die by the sword here. That he's reluctant to change his system because he set out his stall.
Yeah, I think that could be a little bit to do with it. But look, it's very, very easy. We talk. The main thing you have to do in football is kick the ball in the net. If you don't do that, all the other stats mean nothing. They just dwindle away. Our best player, Evan Ferguson, Obafemi, Ogbene, all our best players are up the top of the park. So don't complicate it. Get the ball up to them, play from there. And look, it's not going to be pretty on the eye, but we will win more games. We will be probably not as entertained, but you'll be leaving Lansdowne Road and you'll be a little bit happier with things. You'll be throwing punches. We'd be toured in this group. We'd be saying, if we can beat the Netherlands, get something against them, my God, we could finish second in this group. But as it is, you know, we're propping it up, we're in fourth, and we're only standing on top of Gibraltar. And has anybody seen any attractive football in the 3 games in this group? Because I haven't seen any of it.
Well, I watched France-Greece last night, the highlights of it, and like, France were kind of doing what we were doing, just a bit better, because they have better technical players, and we're very fortunate to win that game. By the way, there was a high boot to the head, and the Greece player got sent off. Mbappe takes the penalty. Keeper to me looks like he's on the line. He's certainly got one leg at very least on his own goal line. Referee, you know, under the hot Paris night, decides that whatever it is, 100,000 people in the stadium is going to have to result that the penalty gets retaken and they get over the line, and it's a bit of a slice of luck. But it was sort of the same type of system. And I don't know, in terms of the attractiveness, I definitely felt in the stadium last night that people would be now in a position where you're more willing to see a bit of a lump ball, or like, this thing isn't working.
In fairness, we did go back to front a little bit against Greece and stuff came off it, so it's not like there's no long balls at all. Can I ask you another question, right? Would Jeff Hendrick and Robbie Brady have had any impact on the performance against Greece?
Possibly. I think in international football, experience accounts for a lot. It really does. I think the more caps you can get on the pitch, the better. Obviously there's exceptions to that rule every now and then. The types of an Evan Ferguson comes along and you just throw that out the window. You say you're going in, he's good enough. But in general, especially in the middle of the pitch, I think you need caps, you need experience, you need people in there. Like, Jeff wouldn't have been too bothered about Greece because he's felt all them feelings before. He would have felt, this is a lower team, but maybe we're getting a little bit dominated in terms of possession. He wouldn't have panicked. I think there was a little bit of panic. I think I was listening to the Irish media before the game, and for some reason they were saying we're favourites in this, and I was looking at the Greece team and thinking this is a very, very tight game. I don't think there's any favourites in this, and it played out that way. It was a very, very tight game, but yeah, again, and hindsight's a great thing, because Smallbone didn't have a great game. You can look and say maybe Hendrick in there would have done a little bit better, but the one thing for me is he played Smallbone, not a problem, but Smallbone has to play in an advanced area. He played in a flat tree, and all he ended up doing was running from to Timicus to Baldock to Timicus to Baldock, and after half an hour his legs were shot, and we had to end up making a couple of changes. But in hindsight, yeah, maybe Jeff or Robbie Brady could have made a bit of a difference in there.
All right, it's 7:56 this morning. OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shaver, your money back. Neon Art Edition is available now. Vinny Perth is joining us. The line just dropped to Vinny, so we'll get him back in just a minute.
Can you see further progress under Stephen Kenny?
I'm not sure. I'm really, if he's going to keep playing this way, I mean, again, I keep putting myself into managers and coaches mindset coming in here. The one thing you don't want, if you're a France, if you're a Holland, and you want to stand on the halfway line and dominate us, the one thing you don't want us to do when we win the ball back is just clip it down the channel and get running after. That's the one thing you don't want us to do, because defenders don't want to run towards their own goal. What you want us to do, not a great footballing team, is to win it off us and start trying to play nice intricate passes, because then they can counter press us and just go and hurt us straight away. So I think you're taking a big weapon away from the bigger nations when they want the counter pressure if you just play it down the channel. Now, it's not just getting it and lumping it down there, it's telling Obafemi, it's telling Ogbenny, as soon as we win it, you need to start peeling off into that channel and be gone, and we will have a head start in the race, and then we can play from there, win and throw in, play in the right areas, just don't play in the wrong areas. So I'm saying lump it up there, but then start to play. It's not lump it up there, win a throw in, throw the ball into the box from there. It's getting it up there and playing in the right areas from there.
Alright, Vinny Perth's line is back. Vinny, good morning to you, how are you?
Good morning, how are we doing? Apologies, I took Shane Hannon's gig today and I took today off. Apologies, I couldn't get in.
Very good, no worries. What now that we've seen the two games back to back, what's your assessment of where we are at the moment?
I think it's difficult because I think middle of last week, I think there was arguments to be made that we made huge progress as a team, and we haven't won enough matches, and we have to accept that. But the Greece game was so bad. I think it has left a lasting effect on sort of the management setup. There's no doubt about that, and we have to call it what it is. I thought, and I was with you on Friday night. Tactically, it was very, very poor, and I've been associated with Stephen Kenny for close on 20 years, and I sat at the game last night, and I sat in sort of behind the dugout and looked at the starting team, and I felt, what are we doing here again? It was almost like we're back in the same position in terms of playing against a lesser nation, playing with a back three, and again, football is full of captain hindsights, but I think I've said it enough times on your show, when you play teams that we play against with the style of player we have, you've got to change. And for the first 15 minutes, and I know some people will throw back who the opposition was and that, but this is part of the problem. The first 15 minutes of the second half, I sat there, I looked at Stephen, and I said to myself, Gaffer, that's the first time I've probably seen your team play your way. Okay, and what I mean by that is that 15 minutes when we went and won the game, and that's what happens in football matches. It's not all pretty for 90 minutes. James McLean on overlaps. Jason there was one stage, I think it was on the 60th minute, where James McLean crosses the ball as the left back in a flat back four, and Jason Knight as the right back almost gets in at the back post. That is, and I'm sorry for boring people, but that's Dane Massey's to Sean Gannon. That's Stephen Kenny's way of playing. That's how you beat the lesser nations. You go and beat them with wing backs or with wingers and full backs, and you overload them in wide areas. And the problem we're going back to, you've asked me about the bigger of the week, is we don't have enough credit in the bank as a management setup, or they don't, because they didn't beat the lesser nations. And I was just, in many ways, disgusted last night coming away from the game going, why have we not done that more against the lesser nations? It was really, really difficult and good at the same time, if that sort of rant makes sense.
Why isn't he doing that, Vinny? If that's, you're looking at that saying that 15 minutes is your team playing your way, why didn't he do that from the start?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I can't.
What's your suspicion?
He got away from what makes himself brilliant for whatever reason. I don't know the ins and outs of the squad. He went to a back three. There was a call for a back three. You remember at the very start of his campaign, we were a little bit too open in midfield with one number 6 and 2 number 8s. But we tactically, if you look at last night in isolation, you look at the first 45 minutes, back threes don't open up. They don't open up defences very well unless they're counter-attack, and that's why that back three system does really well against your France, Portugal away. It's a brilliant system for that. But when you have to break down a team, and Gibraltar basically played 4-5-1 and had different variants of that at different stages, back threes don't do that, because James McLean is one-on-one with their fullback. He's got to show a little bit of magic, do something. Whereas in the second half, he had James McLean and Mikey Johnson. So that drags 2 Gibraltar players out and maybe one on the cover, and it created a little bit of space in different areas. So why he went away from that, I don't know. I don't know if the Kenny project is over, and I think he's got Everest to climb to be still in charge in 2 years' time, and I hope he does it for his sake personally. I'm not sure he's failed his way. I think people could get an insight into Stephen Kenny in that first 15 minutes of the second half last night. That was his style, and that for me is difficult. That's a difficult thing to take, that he hasn't done that more.
So is there something in that for the games that are upcoming? Let's assume that the board don't panic, and I don't think at this point it looks likely that they will. They'd be mad to replace him at this point. It doesn't make any sense. If you take the next 2 games, obviously it's France in Paris and the Dutch here in Dublin. Is there anything from that first 15 minutes for those 2 games, or do we just go back to the back 5, the back 3?
Well, the thing is, yeah, you summed it up in many ways, Jerry, your question, the back 5, the back 3. So if you're not, Man City play with a back 3 because they're brilliant players and they dominate, and they don't have to have their full, and they're allowed to put inverted wingers in that, okay? But when you're not that good, it ends up a back 5. Our back 5 system will suit away in France. No issue with that. We've seen that in the last game against France. And maybe that we need a huge win, and Stephen needs a huge win. And maybe that the Dutch game, he has to look at that 4-3-3 and go for broke. But the back 5, there's no doubt, suits the better nations. It's the Finland. It's those games we've dropped points in that has meant, as a management setup, they don't have enough credit in the bank for the bad performance last Friday, and the tactical errors of not going and beating teams at home and not doing it in style has meant that there's probably very little credit left in the bank. So to answer your question, I think you have to play a 5 against France away, but you may have to throw caution to the wind and go and beat the Dutch with that sort of 4-3-3 system. Listen, it's easy from the cheap seats, but tactically they may have to do that.
Keith, you've been in squads, right? So whatever about the credit in the bank with, it seems like he still has credit in the bank with the fans, enough for them to show up, and there'll be a raucous atmosphere, hopefully, depending on what happens in Paris against the Dutch. From the players' perspective, if he was to say, look, we're going to go for it against the Dutch, what would that do to the squad?
Oh, they'd love it. Absolutely love it. I would imagine the players for example, one example, Friday night, I imagine the players found that difficult. They found it, a lot of times when things don't go well tactically in the middle of a football match, players will look to the bench for some guidance. So not to go over Greece again and keep hammering on about it, but when they kept switching it to the fullbacks, and again, captain hindsight, but most people seen that coming before the game because they were set up. Players are looking for a response from the bench. I think the players would have enjoyed that second half performance. I know it's only against Gibraltar, but they would have enjoyed that. Like Mikey Johnson, Evan Ferguson would enjoy what he has around him, and Mikey Johnson on one wing, whether it's Obafemi or Parrott on the other wing, with Knight getting to the end line, with Seamus Coleman doubling, or James McLean doubling up on the other side, whipping in crosses. That's what they want, get people getting to the end line. So I think the players would love it. It'd be like shackles off. Go back to Ireland against France under Trapp. You remember we took the shackles off over there? Players will love that if we go and do that against the Dutch. Can't do that against the French or we get turned over. But at home against the Dutch, I'd say the squad would really welcome if the manager threw that at them.
Yeah, I think Vinny's spot on. I think the lads would absolutely love it. But just to pick up on something Vinny said there about lads looking at the bench, you know, these are professional players. You know, they play football every single day. A problem solver is what you need on the pitch. You need somebody who can see something, can feel something and think, this isn't right. Whatever the manager has said before the game at half time, it's not working now, so we need to do it this way. And when I played for Ireland, I very rarely played for Ireland, but when I did play for Ireland, the likes of John O'Shea, Richard Dunn, they didn't look to Trapattoni for advice. Robbie Keane, they solved problems on the pitch. We done it all ourselves, and you know, you need problem solvers, and that's probably another thing. And I referenced that without Seamus Coleman this week, that we don't have a leader. We don't have somebody who can solve problems. Somebody will say, I need you here, lads. This need ticky-tacky stuff is not working. Let's play in around the back. So
the only talking I could see on Friday night was lads screaming at each other and giving out to each other, which is never
yeah, and I could see Cullen doing that. You know, lads, come up with me, do this, like little things within the game, how to press. But in terms of the overall bigger picture of the game, it was all like Vinny says, looking at the bench. What do I do now? Where do you want me now, Gaffer? We need problem solvers, because you can't have Stephen Kenny trying to scream to the far side of the pitch when there's 55,000 people in the Aviva. You need problem solvers, but then it goes back to trust. Then it goes back to experience. How many caps have they have? Do they know? Have they been in deep water before? So it's all swings and roundabouts, but I think that's very telling when you see players looking at the bench for guidance rather than knowing what's wrong themselves.
There was a lot of
yeah, and just to balance out Keith's point is that, in fairness though, Keith, in both games the tactical switches at half time made us better. So the sense is, could we have done them earlier, or could we have started the game with those tactical switches? So the Mikey Johnson or the two number 10s, not to lose people, we started the second half of Greece. We were a better team for that. We should have started that way, and we should have started the other night with a flat back four. We shouldn't have played with three centre halves. So therefore, you've got to give players a little bit of leeway as well to say, set them up correctly first. And I know some games go against you, and I've been a manager who struggled in that. As I said, I sit in the cheap seats. Well, they're not that cheap in the Aviva anymore, but I was sitting in the cheap seat last night. But absolutely easy to throw stones. But we shouldn't have started with a back three last night. We just shouldn't. It's non-negotiable for me personally, but I'm not the international manager.
None of this is lost on the players, right? They're all, I'm sure, having the same conversations that we're having. There was a lot made during the week in the press conference about the belief. Stephen Kenny, do you still believe in the players? This was the big thing. You mentioned earlier on that you would know some of the players personally. Do you think the players still believe in Stephen Kenny?
And genuinely haven't, and I wouldn't discuss it with the ones I know or anything like that. I think by and large, players, you get, like, especially in international setups or any time you travel, there will be a bond with the staff there. If this project ends, absolutely certain amount of players in every squad will be disappointed to lose them. Some will be, in many ways, the modern player or any person won't be too bothered, and some be glad because it might mean they get a chance. That's just the nature of it. I think the setup and the way things have been run, it seems to be extremely professional, really modern day staff in there, in terms of like even the backroom staff. People wouldn't know, so people like Danny Miller or the Southampton physio in. I think the players get such high level treatment at the club now that it wasn't always the case they got that at Ireland. I think that's one thing that Stephen has changed, and the players like the environment of it. It's high level professionalism. So I think they'll want this. My sense is they want this project to work out. But players are players, and ultimately they want to win matches as well.
Yeah, I think there'll be a bit of both. There'll be some players that'll want Stephen Kenny in. I didn't speak to Doherty. I listened to his interview after the game when he got sent off against Greece, and he said definitely Stephen Kenny is the man to bring us forward. So is Keith Andrews, so is John O'Shea. And I know Keith Andrews, I know John O'Shea personally, and they're infectious. Their love for football is very, very infectious. I'm sure the lads are very, very close to them, but there'll be lads on the periphery who'll be thinking, maybe if Stephen Kenny goes, I could be in here. And there'll be people that fancy you, there'll be people that don't fancy you. So look, it's one of those things. You just need to be professional and get on with it. But the big thing is we need problem solvers. You can't have people looking at the bench when there's problems on the pitch. You need to go and solve it yourself. And like you said, we needed tactical changes, but I'd still love a Cullen. I'd still love somebody of an older head there to be able to say, lads, this isn't working, just get together for 5 minutes, let's just do this now, do it that way. And managers and coaches largely will accept that. If you go in and they say, what are you doing? I was doing it because I thought X, Y or Z was happening, Gaffer. They will largely accept that.
That's why we need James Coleman, Adrian. Well, that's why we need James Coleman. You wrote him off 3 years ago.
Not at all. I did analysis of one. I did analysis of one game.
Yeah.
And analysis, I'm sure Vinny is laughing at that. No, the point I was going to make was just on your point about the players discussing it. I was down on the touchline, a little bit cheaper than Vinny, I'd say, by all accounts, from listening to his description there, further down the touchline, but just a couple of rows back from the front, watching the players warm up in the first half particularly. And Callum O'Dowda was in a full-on tactical conversation with, I think it might have been Mikey Johnson. There was a lot of gesticulating about 2 or 1, or there was a lot of that tactical conversation going on where it was very clearly him saying what we did at half time. He was preempting that, going, why aren't we doing, like, they were clearly knee deep in a conversation, like in full view of everybody, about how this is going on. And I suppose he's probably one of those players that you talk about there in terms of being on the periphery and feeling as if he should be in the first 11. It's clear that have you been in dressing rooms, Keith, like that before, where players are saying, listen, how are we not doing this thing? I mean, I guess at some point you need Callum O'Dowda to go up to the manager, I mean, not in the middle of the game, but at some point afterwards, and say, to have that conversation with him as opposed to just having it amongst themselves, I suppose. Yeah,
well, I had it with Eddie Howe at Burnley. When Eddie Howe first came to Burnley, he, fairly similar to what Stephen Kenny is trying to do now, he was trying to get us playing football. The crowd at Burnley at Turf Moor weren't on board. They didn't want us to play football. Every time we played a backward pass, you could hear them screaming, get the ball forward. It was, they just weren't on board with the football type of thing. So we had as players, Eddie Howe is still telling us, I want you to pass it out from the back, and this is before you were allowed to stand inside your 18-yard box. So people were coming and pressing the life out of us. Some of us weren't comfortable with it, some of us were comfortable with it. Half the team was having a meeting saying, lads, don't listen to the manager, we're going to start playing our own way. The other lads were saying, no, we will listen to the manager. And all of a sudden it became totally disjointed, and it was all over the place. We'd half the lads running towards the ball, half the lads running away from the ball, and it became very, very disjointed. But yes, sometimes tactically you might not want to do what the manager's telling you to do. You might think it's naive, you might want to go down a different way, but at the end of the day, the manager calls the shots, and if he tells you to do something, you have to do it. But as a player, I've been in a situation where I feel these things aren't working, and you have to go and try and problem solve it yourself. And like I said, managers, if you can go to a manager and say, Gaffer, I did this because of that, I wasn't trying to undermine your tactics, I just thought X, Y or Z was happening, so I played this way, managers will largely accept that, because you're trying to solve a problem and just stop things from happening.
Vinny, the one thing that really needs to happen over the summer for whatever's happening in the future is that the players who aren't playing at their clubs need to get moves, and there's so many of our group that are in that situation at the moment, and we're really hopeful that they're going to develop and that their careers will progress, but we know that the level of competition that they face from all of the best young players in the world is incredibly intense in the top 2 divisions in England. So it's kind of a shaky enough period. When Liam Brady was on the TV the other night saying that this is the worst squad of players that he's seen in his lifetime, nobody's really disagreeing with that.
No, we're not disagreeing with it, because I can understand the point he's making to a point. It's just that I'm great, I repeat myself, but looking through Irish football through the prism of English football is what's holding us back as a nation, because the amount of players playing in the Premiership, it's almost fair to, you've got to be world class. World class, maybe a bit. I've heard you debate world class before. What's the word I'm looking for? You've got to be exceptional now to be a Premiership footballer. But the problem with Liam's comments, and I agree with, like, Liam is a legend. I agree with vast majority of that point. The problem is 10, 15 years ago, you didn't need to be exceptional to be part of a Premiership squad. So world football has changed. England is where it happens, the Premiership. The challenge, the bigger challenge for me is, you go back to some of the players that play for Greece. I made this point on Friday night. You've got players playing with PAOK. You've got players playing with the ones that have left Greece are playing with Strasbourg. They're playing with AZ Alkmaar. They're playing regular European football and group stage football. Okay, and Keith will know this better than me. Championship football doesn't really equate to international football. They're not chalk and cheese, but playing a game every 3 days, real high intensity, is completely different than international football. And the advantage players like playing for AZ Alkmaar is, as I said, getting to a quarterfinals, I think it was, of a Europa League, is experience at international type football. And our players and us as a nation have to get away from that fixation. And it's starting to happen slowly. But we're starting to see players turn up in different countries, and the more players that we can get exposure to the likes of Europa League football, even if it's Conference League football, and I'm not talking about from a League of Ireland hat here, forget League of Ireland for a moment, but the more players we can get travelling away from England and off that gravy train and into top European leagues, as in, when I say below the highest level, Holland, Eredivisie, Turkish leagues, whatever it is, and experience football at different levels, we will improve as a nation. And so Liam is right. I think he's right. It's hard to debate eras, but we ain't going to have 10, 12 players playing regular Premiership football anytime soon, in my view.
Yeah, I do think we'll struggle. Some of the Championship and the international scene, it is very, very different. I played the vast majority of my career in the Championship, and the Championship is blood, sweat, thunder, tears. It's everything. But in terms of a tactical battle, you probably get that when you come up against, the top 3 or 4 in the league. You might get a decent tactical battle. The vast majority of it, like I said, there's no respect. It's 100% milling into each other. It's just relentless, that Championship. So in terms of going to a Championship team and then coming into our international setup and then being told to play and being overloaded with tactic stuff, it can be quite difficult. But like Vinny's saying, if we can spread our wings a bit, get lads all over the continent, then I do think it will help us, especially how we want to play. But at the minute, I think that's somewhere down the road. I think we need to fill holes for the minute and just try and win games. And the way for this Irish team to win games is get the ball out wide and put it in the box. And like I say, it might not be pretty. People might say Mick McCarthy, all this sort of stuff, but I'd rather walk home from the Aviva having beat Greece, or away from Athens last week having beat Greece, rather than being beaten 1-0.
Yeah, I think, it's that's a binary comparison. But like, in your imaginary world, we win those games. But in our experience under Trapp and Martin O'Neill was that there was occasional bits where we would flare up and we'd have some wins, but there was a lot of... I
take that point, but
it's a lot of dross.
It's not just anybody. We can lose to Greece, right? We can lose to Greece. That's not a problem. Greece are a decent team, but you can't go and lose to Greece with that performance.
That's the thing.
You can't have a 10-day training camp in Turkey and in 15 minutes concede 10 corners and a penalty.
And look, I mean, me and Vinny did the game in studio here, and we were making the same point. Like, I don't think anybody has been as vociferous in their support of Stephen Kenny and what he's trying to do as we have been on this show. But but it's very difficult to come out after that game and go, no, it's okay, we're going the right direction.
Well, it feels like the only route back from here, and I appreciate the ludicrousness of it, but the only route back from here is 4 points in the next window.
Vinny, shaking your head there.
No, I thought Adrian was going to mention something like Sam Allardyce. I was just about throwing myself off.
Not, Vinny, we're not there yet.
I shouldn't make a joke about throwing myself off anything. Sorry. Yeah, just listen. There's a hybrid. There's a hybrid of what we're looking for. You know, you can't be Xavi and Iniesta unless you're Xavi and Iniesta. Okay, but we probably can't continue to be that team. Remember watching Ireland, and people were half volleying the ball over the shoulder, and you're like, you're better than that guy. So there is a hybrid of that, and I think if we're set up tactically correct, and we haven't been properly in the last 2 games, the evidence is there. It's not, as I said, it's not Captain Hindsight. It's the evidence is there. I think if we're set up correctly, we can have a good combination of balls down the side, as Keith said, but also there's a time now, European football, international football, you've got to keep it as well. So you can have that hybrid. And remember, there's a seismic shift going on in Irish football, and maybe get into this another day, Ger, but there's a seismic shift going on underage in Irish football. We're teaching people to pass the ball, and you can't just then throw that out and go back to a Sam or a whatever. And we have to have that hybrid and get results at the same time, which I know is going to be difficult. We've got to come up with some balance between that, where we're teaching kids to pass the ball, play a beautiful way. You go to underage football in this country, watch our international 15, 16, 17, 18s, they're all playing out from the back, but they're getting results as well. We need this international team to get results and be a bit more pragmatic and get things right on the way of doing it. And I think what's going on, honestly, it's a huge shift in Irish football underneath. A lot of big good things happening. That's why I really need we need this international team to work out for us.
Yeah, Vinny, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. That's Vinny Perth on the line. And Keith, thanks a million for joining us in the studio as well this morning.